Thank you so much, Linda, for being with me today on the WaveCapital's guest speaker series on relationship building in a team environment. You're my 72nd guest. Linda, how are you today? My former ESPN colleague from Bristol.
Garrett, great to be on. Thanks for inviting me. I'm trying to think of a significant athlete with the number 72. Doesn't come to mind, and maybe I'll get back to you on that.
No worries at all. I really appreciate it, Linda. When you think of relationship building in a team environment, what does relationship building mean to you, and what has it meant to your professional career? I've asked a lot of our former and your current ESPN colleagues, and they all have unique and exciting answers, and I know you will too.
That's a great question, Garrett, and something that I haven't given serious thought to because I think it becomes and does and is successful if you do it naturally and you're genuine at what you do. Just because you're in a workplace doesn't mean you can't be yourself. I think people fail when they try to act like what they think or how they think they should act. And when I mean be yourself, I mean be true to yourself. So for me, 33 years at ESPN, obviously the longest place I've been working at in a row. It started there. It started like, hi, my name is Linda. And I didn't try to be somebody else, whether it was on air or off air. And I think that's been always the key to my longevity and success at ESPN because I never had some kind of act or anything like that to try to impress when I know if I was just stay true to myself and be myself, whether it's around the workplace or on air hosting Sports Center, it would be a win because I wouldn't have it any other way. And I think that was the right strategy. I'm not saying that it's always going to work out or you can't make friends with everyone, but I think you can be happy with yourself when you make that decision because that then it becomes not your issue, not your problem if things don't work out regarding team building and all of that. You are just have a I always thought, for instance, as I go on and on, Garrett, because it really is a super question. Being at ESPN, for example, you cover sports and you cover teams, and I've been on teams. I've grew up loving sports and also playing sports. And I think that had a really a big impact on me on how to get along with people without coming off as cocky, but you can also be confident. And your confidence and your likability and you being genuine, as I mentioned moments ago, makes that other person feel relaxed, makes that other person feel comfortable, whether that person is even with you, your colleague, or someone that, a production assistant, or, one thing that I've always, number one rule of thumb is make people around me comfortable. And whether it's on air interviewing people who don't know me, only know me from television, or if it's an intern just starting out at ESPN, I think that's very important because we're all in it together.
Absolutely. And I always felt that when you're at ESPN, whether for the long duration of your career or just for a short time, you're a part of a family and it's a wonderful culture and it's a unique club, if you will. And I believe that when I have spoken with people and tell them I worked at ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports, everybody used to look at me like, wow, you're so lucky. What was it like? I hear from other friends or family members who have worked there, how much they've enjoyed it. And to me, when you're there, you don't really think about it until after you depart and you're on to your next career assignment that, wow, for the short time in my case that I was there, how special, how truly special it was because I got to work with people you know very well: John Anderson, Scott Van Pelt, Robert Smith, Robert Flores, Wendy Nix, Lou Holtz, Mark May, Reese Davis, the late John Saunders, the late Barry Sachs, Tim Kirkchin. I mean, George Smith, Seth Greenberg. I can go on and on. Janine Edwards. I mean, they're all coming to me as I'm talking to you because you can put yourself back in that moment. And, for you to have worked at ESPN and to touch a lot of people's lives, that I'm sure that gave you so much gratification.
Yeah, that means a lot. And, until I step away, I have glimmers of that when I meet people and people come up to me and talk about the impact I've made. But first and foremost, I just try to be their best buddy and friend. And then they tell me, they grew up with me. And I go, that's a compliment. Don't feel shy about saying that. I have no problem with that. That makes me feel really good, actually. But I remember when Rich Eisen left many years ago, and he went on to do great things and still is doing amazing things, which I'm really proud of Rich regarding that. But that was the first thing he said to me. He goes, Linda, you know what I miss the most? I miss that camaraderie, the people, that college campus atmosphere that we all had in those old days at ESPN. And when you were there, it was a great time as well, that time period for sure, because it still existed. I moved out to LA 7 years ago and worked with an incredible LA crew for Sports Center. Sadly, that studio just closed down in May, but that also was probably just a fantastic group on a smaller scale, because the Bristol, Connecticut campus is huge and it keeps growing and growing and growing. But in the old days, which I like to say, it was just all for one for all. And it did really feel, you mentioned the word family, it did really feel like that. And I've heard that from so many people that have worked there and left and said that's what they miss. They miss, not that where they are isn't bad and the people aren't bad there, but the fact that it was just something different. Now as we look at our business and, podcasts rule the world, we also, the streaming services rule the world. ESPN has had to change. It's not the same. That's not my pay grade to be in those rooms, or I don't have those roles. But I know it can't be easy for those people who have to make big decisions, big money decisions, to compete now with these other networks. When I started in 1992, ESPN was the only game in town, and it was a thrill and it was a dream job. But you know what? There was no luck involved. To me, I spell luck, WORK, work. I work to make my break and get that opportunity. For me, I can't talk about others. For me, ESPN was not my first job in the business. I had to go really kind of pay my dues. And also being a woman, at that time, it's just, there's nothing given to me on a platter, let me tell you.
It's true. And you talk about how you were, when I say early pioneers, I know that ESPN started, it just passed its anniversary. 1979 is when ESPN came about, and or about to pass its anniversary. It's September. And you came in 1992, but I still consider you, and this is a compliment, by the way, one of the early pioneers of ESPN, because you were in the era, whether it's Kenny Mayne or Chris Berman and people like those, who you're one of the first ones that I just remember growing up and watching with Stuart Scott and Dan Patrick
Yeah.
and others. And because you had mentioned as a woman, you really had to break barriers, and people followed suit, because they looked at your career and they were inspired by your career. And a lot of women wanted to get in the business and be anchors because of you. So that probably was special, knowing that you were a role model to so many women. And perhaps you think of stories at that time, when young women would come up to you and probably ask, Linda, tell me about, what your experience is like, and what could you share, what wisdom could you provide?
Yeah, Garrett, lot of stories like that, and I take the time to talk to a lot of young women who said exactly what you said. Grew up with me, made them believe that it was possible that a woman could be a Sports Center anchor. And because for people who don't know, when I started in 1992, I was, Sports Center was my thing. I mean, they saw that in me. They knew I understood each game, every big sport, because I grew up loving it. I watched games with my dad. I grew up in New York, big fan, of several New York sports teams, and I never lost that. I didn't become jaded. I was a fan first. And that's why I felt I could always connect to the viewer and everyone. And besides the fact that I understood the game and was able to do highlights like I wasn't reading them because I knew the game, and so I'm proud of that. And that's always been my strength. Now, it's sometimes that's a problem to a fault, because ESPN chose not to take me out of that role. A few times I was able to break out of that role. I wanted to be at more at games and be there and be reporting and doing all that. But because for to them, Linda, you're great at Sports Center. We're just going to keep hosting Sports Center. I mean, I didn't complain. It was still great. It was still a high, and the many amazing people that I got to work with. I got a question the other day, Garrett, about, and I always am asked this question about who did you most like to work with over your, 33 years at ESPN hosting sports. And I go, I can't pick one person out, but I will say this because it's part of what you've asked me, is the fact that the person that I most liked working with by my side on SportsCenter was always the person that felt like it was a team, that we were a team, a two-person team. We're not like one person with all their catchphrases and ignoring when I try to bring them in a highlight. No, that is the kind of person I did not like to work with. Thank goodness there were only a few of those people who I will not name. But the people that always I enjoyed working with are the people that shared the stage, we played off each other, having fun. So many times I'd get off that set and I'd be like, wow, that was fun, right? Or when sports, and I also love the fact doing sports centers that happen when games are just ending, where you're ad-libbing and you have to react and you're seeing highlights before the world sees them. This is back in the day when there was no iPhones and such, and no, anything you could see on your phones. And so when the viewer was seeing it for the first time, so were we, the anchor. So these are the kind of things that kept me interested, kept me intrigued. I was a sports fan first. And that's a big reason why, for the longevity, and where so many people, especially young women, thought they could do this. Also, I want to say, all the young men like you, who grew up watching me, and even guys younger than you and a little older than you, that was important too, just as important, because they saw that a woman could know her stuff and deliver it and be good at it and be accepted, and that it was nothing unusual about it. And I think that was just as important, as well as opening doors for young women to know that they can do the same thing I'm doing.
Of course, and I'm so glad you brought that up because as a man or younger, this is going on now, 14 years ago when I met you just by circumstance. It wasn't planned. I was in the ESPN cafeteria, and I think it was maybe a Saturday that I was working on the College Ball Live team, and I was having to pick up my lunch, and then I think either Jesse or John or whomever wanted me to help them grab their lunch. I remember running into you and talking to you and just having about a 5 or 6 minute conversation. And I don't remember exactly what we talked about, but I just have it in my mind, like where we were and just the lay of the land of just where the cafeteria was. And I just remembered that, although I don't remember exactly what our discussion was about, it was most likely, hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. This is what I do. And I admire your career. But I just remember how nice and gracious you were to, it wasn't planned, but you took time, knowing that I was a production assistant, but that you took the time to talk to me and, ask me how was I enjoying ESPN or along those lines. So
Right.
your point, it's like I remember that to be a positive experience so many years later. And it's how people make other people feel. It's that experience that you take with you. Although a small experience, it was big impact. So I really appreciate that.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. And, and that I think that's always been important. Also, I've always gone about my life, even outside of ESPN, wherever I'm at, I always assume that someone has recognized me, and they're maybe not saying who I am or making note of the fact that they do recognize me or saying anything. And I still try to be nice to them, because you just never know. And even if they didn't recognize me, who cares? You still should try to be nice to people. Which, sometimes I look at some people that are in the business now and I'm like, they just didn't get the email, they never got they never got it. They never understood that they have a lot of people they should be grateful for and thank to be in that position that they're in, and they should never forget it. But sadly, not everyone is like you and me, Garrett.
It, it's true. I mean, we always try to make a great first impression, and you never know the people you talk to at one point, right, in your life. You never know when you might reconnect, 10, 15 years later, and we're reconnecting almost 15 years later. So I really appreciate that we get to speak today about a topic that's so dear to us, relationship building in a team environment. And You talk about hosting Sports Center, and you are the only Sports Center anchor in ESPN history that has hosted the most Sports Centers. So I know that we were talking briefly offline before interviewing today, and you had said that it really has to do about longevity. That plays a factor. But outside of longevity, I mean, just the fact that you are known for that, how do you interpret that? I mean, what does that mean to you when somebody tells you that you've hosted the most Sports Centers in ESPN's history?
Yeah, I'm really proud of that because it's sort of like I think of like the Cal Ripken thing, right? He had that record, played the most amount of games in a row and all that, the Iron Man type of situation. I'm not saying, although I am in multiple Hall of Fame, so I could say I'm not saying I'm a Hall of Famer, but I am a Hall of Famer. But the point is, I never thought about the number. I never thought about it like it was a chore to go to work. Oh, I got to host Sports Center again. Because once I'm there, once I'm preparing for a show, I always my number one rule of thumb when it came to this was like I don't care how many times I've been on the air hosting Sports Center. I had to always imagine someone out there could be seeing me for the very first time and making a judgment of my performance as a Sports Center anchor. And if I really know my stuff, they could be seeing me for the very first time. You just never know. And so that I always have had in my head and never assume or I could rest on my laurels, type of thing. So that's really how I always stayed at my best, being at my best, and never just assume everything was going to be great just because I've done the most Sports Centers than anybody.
Sure. And that is a great explanation. And I'm so glad that you're able to put that into perspective because being able to host the most Sports Centers, it's what you did, but it is not necessarily only about who you are because you talk about being in multiple Hall of Fames and you talk about, again, the relationship aspect of the business about, wanting to be seated next to somebody who really cared about that team, who really cared about, working together and not just tossing one highlight back and forth to each other throughout a show. When you think of your colleagues, people we know, or again, people who were role models to you, what can you tell me about that? The relationships that have been really dear to you during your time at ESPN?
Yeah, you know what I always say, and I'll say this too about when I meet athletes as well. For me, it's about the friendships. It's not about, oh, I have to, and I had opportunities early on in my career to interview several, big name athletes and this and that. And from, back in the day, from Shaq to Andre Agassi to Michael Jordan to Wayne Gretzky to currently the many athletes now. LeBron and Connor McDavid, whatever. To me, I respect the athlete. I've always put the athlete first. Like it wasn't always about, oh, I got to try to win an Emmy or make this athlete cry or make this athlete say something. Or there's a way to make, again, getting back to make them feel comfortable when you're talking to them. Now, this is also important for the workplace where, again, I'm the type, one of my favorites of all time is Neil Everett, who I work with on Sports Center, mostly in LA. And, we'd always talk about our dogs, family members, which concert we're going to. That always, came first. It just felt like home with certain people that I've worked with. And that takes two to tango for that to happen. So this is not breaking news. This is nothing new for people who work in any kind of workplace they work with. You know which person gets it, meaning they know that they're not defined by this job. They love their job, and you can love your job. I love my job, and I have a passion for sports, but I'm not defined by it. I'm much more than that. It's a big part of me, but I'm not defined by this persona. Never was, never been that way ever. And I think that's a big reason. I think if you stay like that, if you can just keep yourself that way and not let anything go to your head, and it's not easy, but if you can do that, you'll be much happier for it. And that's why I still enjoy doing what I do. And I'm not looking where they say the grass is always greener somewhere else. I'm not saying I've never felt that way. Early on in my career, I thought I was missing out on things, but I've been really happy. I make a joke. I always say loyalty doesn't pay. If I moved to a few different networks, I would have been making so much more money. And it's not about money, obviously, to me. To me, it was about enjoying where I worked and still having a smile on my face and getting along with the people that I work with and caring about them. And it doesn't matter what workplace you work at. That's really important. You're going to have a better existence and a better balance in your life if the place you go to work every day and the people you come in contact with every day, that you get along and you look forward to seeing them. Not everyone is going to be like that. You're not going to look forward to seeing a few people. So life's too short. You don't, if you don't have to pay attention to them, you don't. But all the others, show an interest in their life. Ask them about how are things going? What'd you do this weekend? Things like that, and that's going to come back to you in so many wonderful ways.
And it speaks to the fact that being at ESPN for 33 years, that everything that you just said is why you stayed at ESPN, because there were always more positives than there were not, because you felt that it was a family, as we discussed, and you felt that, as you point out, you could have went to other places, maybe make more money, or to your point, you knew for a fact that you were going to make more money, but as you said, it wasn't about the money. You cared more about the relationships. You cared more about the environment. You cared more about the friendships. And loyalty is a big part of relationship building. And you hope that when people are loyal to others, that those people will be loyal back. You know, it's a
Yeah. Yeah.
mutual
And
relationship.
then jumping around, if I was jumping around, I never would have built this, sort of legacy and this impact, as much of an impact if I was maybe only there from, through the 90s or,
Sure.
left early in the 2000s. The big reason why that I'm really most proud of is that I didn't want to jump around because I was raising two kids
Hmm.
and I didn't want to move them around. And I always put
Right.
my kids first.
Tell
And
me
when
about your children.
yeah, they're grown, my daughter's 30, just turned 34, my son's 29. And when I look at how they turned out as independent, amazing people, I know I made the right decision. And that decision probably is not what everyone would have done, but for me, it was great because they stayed with their friends. They have lifelong friends that they had by staying in one place for all these years. Just really meant a lot. So that played a huge factor also in my decision just to stay at ESPN. And it really worked out.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you could speak so highly of your children, because that, as a parent myself, my wife and I, we have a, almost 3-year-old son, and
Nice.
just to be, newer parents these past few years, we have so many more years ahead, God willing, of being parents, where we're going to watch our son and, God willing, future children grow up and be model citizens in society. And we're in the early chapter, right, of his development. And then to hear you talk about raising your kids and they're already in their late 20s, already going into their 30s, it's just interesting, the continuum of parenthood, of raising children, and there's different stages, and it's an evolutionary process of making sure that your kids have everything they need, and no matter how old they are, how old you are, you're always going to be their mother, right, in your case.
Right. I always say it. I mean, I always, in every social media bio, first thing I put is mom, because that's the most important thing to me in my life, being a mom. It's
That's
before
so
anything. So, I mean, it's always been that way. So, yeah, no, and good for you. I mean, that's great. I mean, there's nothing better. I mean, again, I respect people who choose not to have children as well for whatever reason, but being a parent is the greatest thing ever.
And the same thing when I interviewed Nancy Lieberman, and Nancy said the same thing. The most important thing is being a parent, and in her case, her son TJ, her being a mother to TJ, that is the most important thing for her. And I love to hear the fact that that's the most important thing for you and your children.
Always. Yeah. It's great. And, nobody's perfect. You can't be perfect, but it's great. I mean, I like tonight I'm celebrating my daughter's birthday, which was 2 days ago, but I surprised her, showed up with flowers at her door. She didn't expect me on her actual birthday. And, she was working at home. We spent an hour together. And even though we had plans for tonight to celebrate, made my day,
Happy
and it
birthday to
just,
her.
yeah, thanks. And the thing is, It's funny. I always think back of a story when she was in college. She went to Northeastern, great school, and I think she was a freshman, and I used to always call her at that time. I used to call her Love Bug, like in the text messages, you know. And so she was with some friends, you know, in freshman year in college, and these two friends sat there and saw that I had written Love Bug in the text message, you know, whatever. And then the friends told her, "Wow, your mom still calls you by those nicknames." And my daughter Sammy thought, "Yeah." And then the friend said, "God, I wish my mom still did that." Right.
Right.
So, you know, just when you think, you know, they don't care, but my daughter shared that story with me at that time, and that meant so much to me. Like that, yeah, I think I'm doing it right.
And that's so special, when you can, have those moments where and they're endearing, and they bring out emotion, they bring out, that good feeling of, I really did great for my kids. I mean, nobody is perfect. I mean, no human being is perfect. I mean, a lot of sacrifice, Linda. I mean, having the career that you did, and you were probably working hours that weren't conducive when you're raising your kids, a lot of time away, but it's moments like those where it showed your kids that you were really there for them when they needed it, and that you can look back on that time with your child, and it brings up great feeling of happiness and positive emotion.
Yeah. I mean, there's always been a part of me that I felt a little guilt. I know it was my job that I was away a lot and I had the weird hours and I worked late into the early morning hours. You know, for most of my career at ESPN when I was in Bristol, I mean, I did the late show, you know, and I was there, you know, I'd leave the house at 5 p.m., sometimes 4:30, and not get back till 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. And, you know, I'd still have to get up early. And then my ex-husband was very significant at that point, helping. But, you know, I always felt bad and guilty, you know, but not being there. And then later on, when my kids were older, I had to talk about it. You know, I said, listen, I always have this guilt on me. And they both were like, Mom, stop feeling guilty. You know, we're fine. You know, we turned out fine. We're good. You know, you were working hard. You were the breadwinner. You were doing this, so we didn't have to worry about things. You know, let that go. And that was an amazing moment as well, type of thing. And it's just like a message to everyone who ever thinks, who doesn't communicate, who doesn't, you know, who definitely holds things in and doesn't share things that bother them with their family or even their colleagues, or, you know, type of thing, where they should really talk about what's bothering them because they might be pleasantly surprised.
Sure, and communication is everything when it comes to, our business, and when it comes to the journalism field that we choose in different parts of our life. And in your case, I mean, throughout your professional life, and the fact that you can have those moments and having to be able to communicate with your kids. And it's a good feeling for you to know that they validated your existence as their mother, in the sense of, no, you were there for us, and don't
Right.
feel guilty and don't feel down on yourself. I mean, you were there for us, and
Yeah.
they're validating that to assure you that you did everything you possibly could to make their lives the best it could be. And they valued your role, and they valued that you were providing for your family, and that it meant so much to them, even though it may not have been spoken about at times. Just having that sit down with your daughters and knowing that you were there for them when they needed you most.
Yeah, my daughter and my son. It's all great. And that's the other thing I tell young parents who have balancing careers and such. Say it's not the quantity, it's the quality of when you're there with them. You know, don't be on your phone. Don't be, I mean, even if you're walking your dog. I mean, I say the same thing to dog parents too. You know, when you're walking your dog looks forward to that walk or multiple walks, and you're on your phone, really? You know, again, same with kids. You know,
Right.
kids obviously more significant, but maybe just a little more because
Yeah.
I'm a big dog person. But you know, just it's not the quantity of time, it's the quality of time. And people can't forget that.
Absolutely. And you talk about the athletes, switching gears, you talk about the athletes that you've come across. You've mentioned Andre Agassi, who I've met Andre Agassi and Steffi Graf years ago, and he's a fellow Armenian like me, and always watched Andre Agassi's career. Got to meet Michael Jordan and spend a few days with him at the Hoopty Celebrity Golf Classic that you were a part of. I was there in 2005 with my father, who golfed with Richard Dent, Super Bowl 20 MVP for the Chicago Bears. And I was enrolled in Fred Whitfield's Achievements Unlimited basketball camp. So I was there for the week, but I was able to be with my father. We went to the Grand Over Resort in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I got to spend time with the golfers and being there with my father and his business associates at the time, and getting to meet Michael and Carmelo Anthony, Greg Anthony, Charles Oakley, Chris Paul, Larry Fitzgerald, the late Joe Morgan, the broadcaster James Brown, so many people, Lonzo Mourning. And I felt that, as a 17-year-old at the time, that I get to watch my basketball idol, Michael Jordan, but then all the other players I watched growing up in the NBA. But in your case, because it was a rare occurrence for me, but in your case, being a sports center anchor and having access to all these athletes, getting to interview them, and then not having to spend time with them while you're on job, while you're on site, but like where you're getting to experience, Hoop T Celebrity Golf Classic. Can you tell me some of the memories you remember from that time? Because although we were there at different years, I have my, experiences which I hold dear, but would love to know like what that meant for you to be at Hoopty.
Well, not only Hoopty, but all these events where I wasn't working, right?
Right.
To me, that's the most important thing, and it always helped where, because of being on Sports Center as much as I was, especially in those early days, these athletes felt like they already knew me and they already respected me. So that was more than half the battle. So I didn't have to it's not like me coming out of college and then trying to prove to people that I knew what I was talking about, right? These are professional athletes, Hall of Famers, whatever. They already felt like they knew me and they respected me and they understood me. And that's why I got the invites. And I wasn't there as a working person. I was there playing golf. And to me, that's the best part of the job. That was the best sidebar of the job. That was the icing on the cake. Yeah, the late great Stuart Scott, who I loved working with, he got to go to a lot of these things as well. And it was just the greatest thing because the athletes would talk to me and feel comfortable talking to me and knowing I'm not going to be broadcasting this on television because they trusted me. And that's what meant so much to me in this job, that these athletes trusted me and knew making a headline story that wasn't on my agenda. My agenda was building relationships and getting to know these guys. And them having a chance to freely speak to me without worrying about it. So it was a great experience, had so much fun at those events. It was tremendous. I got to get back into that golf circuit. I've been playing tennis more since I came out to LA, but the golf it's really a fun groups getting together for golf.
Yes, and you speak about tennis. What are things that people wouldn't know about Linda Cohn? The sports enthusiast, the sports anchor. So, like you said, it's what you did, but it doesn't define who you are outside of the persona of being a sports center anchor. So, what are your other interests or hobbies? For the average listener and viewer at home, what would they not know about Linda Cohn, the
Yeah.
person?
Yeah. Well, anybody who follows me on Instagram, or mostly on Instagram or Twitter, X, whatever, at Linda Cohn, they know that I love being where things are happening and I love being a fan. I pay for my tickets. Let's talk about the recent Stanley Cup final. I never gone to Edmonton. My brother and I broke the bank. We paid for these amazing tickets sitting right behind, front row behind the Florida Panthers bench. I was in Edmonton though. Now, being ice level is nothing new to me. I've worked between the benches, but that's working. So here, as a hockey fan, being behind the Florida Panthers bench during the Stanley Cup Final Game 2, which was a double overtime game, I don't mind doing that. Like, that's where I work. I'll spend my money in these ways about moments. I'm not Linda Cohn, as you just said. I'm not into materialistic things. I'm not into any of that. I'm into moments and sharing it with people I love. I went to game 4. I did that by myself. I flew out to Florida and to sit with those Panthers fans. And I saw another great game, which went into overtime. So I got lucky in the 2 games that I paid out of my pocket to see. But there's nothing like being with the fans And it was great. And at that game 4, by the way, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce was in the same building they were watching. And I was like ready to stalk because they may not know I'm a Swiftie from back in 2009. Love her. My daughter is about her age, a little year younger. So I grew up with Taylor. I grew up obviously with my daughter. So there's just like a connection there. Just love Taylor Swift, everything that she stands for, what she's helped, how many young women, inspired women. It's just the perfect human being. So that was a bonus. So I've seen Taylor 4 times in concert, 2 Eras tour. Also opened the wallet, had no trouble doing it, loved it. One time sitting on the floor. It's just, to me, that's what it's about. Moments. I went with my daughter all those times. Also, I love just going to concerts. I love music. I grew up with like pop music, all kinds of music, genres, classic rock. They call it classic rock now. Listen, I've been around so long. The music I listen to, singer-songwriter music, is now yacht rock, and I'm like, okay, whatever. You could label it that. But I go to concerts. Like I'm seeing The Weekend next week. For the second time. I'm going to see Teddy Swims in September. I'm going to see Lady Gaga for the first time with my daughter. So anyway, those are the kind of things I love doing. And also any big sporting event, if I can't, be there because we're not made of money, but unless I'm sitting there with a family member, like my son or my daughter or my brother, I'd rather watch the biggest of sporting events by myself. I mean, I take it that seriously. I'm not big on Super Bowl parties, none of that. I like watching, I'm very serious about it. I'm like, not that I don't bet on the game, but I don't have the dog in the fight. Now, if I have a dog in the fight, one of my teams, well, then it's definitely like a sacred time, you know. But I never want to lose that feeling as a fan ever. And I haven't gone this long without losing it, so I don't think I plan to lose it anytime soon. So
And
that's just the nutshell of what I'm about.
yeah, and that's wonderful. I love how you got into all the different categories of what type of music you liked and what type of sports. And yes, I was when we connected a couple weeks ago, and I'm following you on Instagram. I saw that you were attending the Stanley Cup Finals games, and you really, I could tell just by what you were capturing and your reference to Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce too. I could tell that you're really emotionally charged.
Yeah, yeah. Listen. I got a full disclosure. When that happened, when those two got together, and the way they got together, when he somehow got a friendship bracelet to her with his phone number on it, I was like, well, that's not going to fly. That's kind of stupid. But everything's timing, and the timing was right. Her fresh off a breakup, feeling the lowest of lows, and him the exact opposite of what she had the couple of guys last dated or been with. Total opposite. So that's how love is sometimes. It's all about timing.
If they tied a knot, I think everybody around the world would be so happy.
Yeah, they're like our royal couple.
Yes, I I I, I truly believe that. I truly
Yeah.
believe that. Any final thoughts when you think about just the games that you watched, and that when you hosted Sports Center, and the games that you had to cover, were there certain games that stuck out to you throughout the years? Any final thoughts about relationship building, touching upon that more, or just words of wisdom that you can give the audience of when they're looking for a career path and they're trying to form their identity, and maybe it's sports and as a professional or collegiate member, right?
Right, right, right. Well, there's a few things there. A lot of people, I did my commencement address at my college, Oswego State, back in May, which was a big thrill. And I had many young people come up to me after, and what kind of advice would you give to me? All this kind of stuff. And I would basically say, you're living in a world right now. Well, yeah, there's a lot of people who want to do this. But there are a lot of ways to get your voice out there now with YouTube and TikTok and all these ways, podcasts, to get people to see what you can do. I mean, it takes work, but you can do it. Back in my day, it was very tough. I would have to, make a tape of myself doing a fake sportscast basically and send it out. type of thing. And that's how I got my big break when I worked in Seattle at KIRO TV, a CBS affiliate at that time, because that was my biggest TV break, and that's where ESPN eventually saw me. So it really takes work, it takes luck, it takes timing. You just have to go for it. You know what I'm saying? It sounds cliche, but it's fact. You never want to look back and say you didn't really work at it, you didn't try to make it work. You can always do plan B, plan C, plan D. That's always going to be there for you to do. And you could still enjoy sports in other ways. It doesn't have to be your profession. The other thing is that, I know betting has taken over the sports world, and that's another topic. But besides the betting, where you have to stay true to your team, stay true to the athletes you love. One thing that has changed for me over the years, or I've become more noticing it more and wanting to notice it more. It's not necessarily about the sport or the team. It's about I like a good story. And my daughter pointed this out to me because she's noticed the things I gravitate to. Like, you may not like a team or a sport. Like, there were so many great stories in this Stanley Cup final. Like this Brad Marchand, who was a hated guy in Boston, who was basically washed up, who Florida picked up at the trade deadline. He's 37 years of age. He could have won MVP. You're learning about his amazing family and that he's a great guy and a great human. And his kids left him a voicemail before game 6 and saying, no matter what happens, we love you, Daddy, and all these kind of things. So get to know the stories behind the story and the story of certain athletes. And you're going to fall in love, you'll see, with the story of certain players and what they've gone through or what they're about, or get to know them. I think that's a great path young people can follow when it comes to sports. And just don't follow the path that everyone's following. Like I said, look for another avenue where you can find perhaps your pot of gold at the end of it.
Yes. On that note, I love the fact that you ended what it means to love sports, that the story, everybody always talks about that they love a good story, whether it's watching the movies, whether it's where you work or an experience, you know, as journalists, as fellow journalists, whether it's sports, media, news, politics, whatever the case may be, it's always about the story. What is it about the story that is so engaging, enticing, that riles people up in a good way, with emotion? And
Right.
what is the moral of it? What is the meaning behind it? What is the significance, depending on whether a team wins or loses? But even no matter what side of the game, whether it's a win or a loss, there's always a great story. So I really appreciate you ending on that, because with relationship building and team environment, to build relationships, whether in the gentleman who connects with his kids with a voicemail, it all matters having that as a part of the story. So I want to thank you again, Linda, for your time on the Wave Capital's guest speaker series on relationship building in a team environment, my 72nd guest. Thank you so much. It's great to reconnect, and I hope to have many more conversations with you in the future.
Thanks, Garrett. Continued success with this. And it was great talking with you again.
Yes, wonderful talking to you as well. Thank you, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, Linda. You take care now.
You too, Garrett.